Want to know the secret to immediately compliant APIs? I'm Chandler Ferry, and I've got a decade of experience working in platform engineering, specifically on compliance and developer productivity. I have taken multiple companies to full SOC 2 and HIPAA compliance. Today, I'm going to be discussing generated SDKs and how they're the key to your compliance deadlines. I'll start with compliance and what exactly you need to do in order to have a compliant application. This is all built on the backbone of the open source OpenAPI specification, and I'll discuss how that enables compliance to fall into place, followed by SDKs and how we can use that backbone to allow our developers to be efficient and automatically compliant. Then I'll briefly touch on Swagger and how it's used as a visualization medium in order to make sure that the OpenAPI specification is working to its fullest potential. And we'll also discuss a little bit about how manual or automated testing is impacted and what we can do to assist there. Finally, I'll discuss some use cases of how I've implemented this in the real world and how it actually performs. The function of good software is to make the complex appear to be simple. This was said by Grady Booch, a developer of the UML. This really should always be true in software, regardless if you're talking about modeling or if you're talking about creating a sort of application. Let's start with compliance. Regulatory software compliance is a loaded topic, but it really boils down to four things. Only process the expected data, only transmit the minimum expected data in response, be a reliably secure application, and be transparent when someone needs to audit you, whether that's a cybersecurity firm or an external vendor. But how do you accomplish these things simply? My proposed model is having a source of truth such as OpenAPI. OpenAPI is an open source specification that is the backbone of what I'm showing you today. This allows you to have a standardized model of all expected API routes. It enables you to have transparency by using a visualization tool in order to see your API in a human-readable format, which can be provided to an auditor or an external vendor. It also streamlines onboarding because it provides your developers with the ability to understand the scope of a service and where to look when they are trying to understand the holistic application, allowing them to rapidly grasp what is internal, external, the versions of that API, and the responsibilities. And it enables the company to have a compliant system by being able to put a validation middleware on your API that says, hey, if the request is not within this criteria, return a 400 bad request. And if the server is not responding within this criteria, disallow that response. It's not allowed. Because the OpenAPI specification enables these things, it becomes the pillar of my compliant APIs. But how do you actually put this into practice? Well, let's start with generating a source development kit from the OpenAPI specification. The SDK allows you to have IntelliSense for your developers, which streamlines the software development process and makes it so you can turn around and make changes faster and know that they are actually going to function as intended. It handles authentication automatically, so your developers don't need to pass around a proprietary HMAC or API key library. It reduces knowledge gaps and onboarding time as everything is right in the development environment without having to seek out documentation sources. And it allows you to use the standardized model that has been used across the world to develop your application, whether that's internal only or it's being used by external partners as well. But an SDK can be complicated to create, so how do we simplify that process? Well, as we discussed, we create an OpenAPI specification, whether that's manually created using JSON or YAML, or automatically created using decorators on your backend API server code. Then we can adopt or create an OpenAPI validation middleware that guarantees the API requests and responses meet the specified criteria. This ensures that all those requests and responses are compliant with that specification to be allowed through. This is not a breaking change if the specification is created properly. From here, we can generate the OpenAPI SDK, which also follows that specification. And we can merge in our HMAC logic or API keys or other authentication systems, as well as environment configuration files, all into the SDK so developers don't have to think about it. We can then put this into place on our front end, and we've solved most of our compliance issues already. But we must utilize all of this in order to have a fully compliant application. We have to put all of those validation systems in place and enable the developer efficacy to be higher by doing so. By curating that source of truth, by enabling that OpenAPI specification to be the peg, the rest of our compliance falls straight into place and saves us money. An example of this is Swagger. Swagger visualization is going to be used for auditing. This is an open source visualization tool that utilizes that OpenAPI spec and provides a human-readable interface to validate the API, as well as discover and diagnose vulnerabilities. It is exceedingly difficult to determine if server code is following the expected rules. But if your source of truth is human-readable and can be reviewed by the product team as well, you can define the expected scope together. This can provide cybersecurity firms with a single little document that can be used for auditing, as well as external partners in order to validate that they are able to do what they want to do with your application. Or internal developers who are learning about a service, they can quickly look at this in order to understand what that service is about. It looks something like this. There's a category, pet, the type of HTTP request, such as put, post, get, delete, etc. The path has identifiers within that path. Authentication on that path is defined on the right side there, as well as any additional request or response schemas will be listed inside of these dropdowns. They're not shown here, but this is a relatively well-known specification. This all comes because you have that specification as a source of truth. But we also have testing benefits. Testing is a relatively wide topic that varies throughout the industry, but because we have the Swagger visualization alongside the programmatic OpenAPI specification, you are provided the ability to enhance your manual and automated testing suites. For manual, you can look at that Swagger visualization in order to understand what you're supposed to be doing. For automated, you can grab that programmatic API file and generate tests, create mock responses, or simply validate that the OpenAPI validation middleware is functioning as intended for compliance reasons. So let's actually talk about real-world use cases here. I've put this in place in healthcare because it heavily assists in HIPAA compliance by ensuring that your validation middleware prevents leaking data that is not necessary for the requested data sets. This saves money as a breach costs anywhere from $100,000 to upwards of $5 million. I've utilized this model for rapid SOC 2 compliance, especially in startups, because it significantly reduces the lift to be SOC 2 compliant as you're implicitly secure while simultaneously improving turnaround time by allowing developers to be more efficient, which saves money. It does this by enabling entry-level developers or interns to develop within your application without needing a lengthy onboarding process and prevents reverse engineering from being needed to be done because you can understand the application as a whole to begin with. That also goes for international or offshore teams, like I recently did in Vietnam. You have this common language where things mean exactly what they need to without needing to have them read an English-based specification document that is overly zealous in its descriptions. You can just look at the code's IntelliSense as operation IDs from the OpenAPI specification will be standardized based on categories that are named in Kanban tickets or otherwise, as well as words like get, update, archive, get list for array-based things that are very specific in what they're trying to do. But it's also meant for streamlining learning, whether it's entry-level or junior devs, even developers that I've been teaching recently by using games as an immediate dopamine loop can be taught this way. By having documented IntelliSense at their fingertips, non-developers know exactly what they're capable of at all times without needing to get outside of their development environment. So if some AI says, hey, use some part of this SDK, they can hover over that function call, learn what it does, figure out if it's the right thing or not, and They understand what it expects, what data model it needs, what structure it needs, how many parameters are required, what is optional, things like that, and know exactly how to utilize it and whether or not it's the right fit for the job. Using this system, I have been able to ensure that compliance is at the core of any company I've consulted or worked for without having any additional work added to the roadmap. It has been an invaluable technique in my platform engineering toolkit, and I would love to see it being put in place by other people. Once you implement the OpenAPI specification as the single source of truth, using my model, you get security via the validation middleware, an SDK for developers, Swagger visualization, and test generation for compliance, all for free. The validation middleware ensures that the API is secure within the bounds specified by your product team, ensuring compliance. The SDK automatically follows those bounds and enables developers to reduce context switching, which makes them more efficient. Swagger visualization eliminates all auditing costs through automatic completion as it's already ready. You can just provide them the file, which saves money. Test generation enables further trust in the product because you know that the product is going to work as expected. All of this is possible because the OpenAPI specification is pegged as a single source of truth. That all being said, thanks for your time. Please reach out with questions at chandlerferry.com, or you can email me at chandlerferry@gmail.com.